Emotional eating has been a huge issue for me at many different times in my weight loss journey. And I'm sure it's a problem for people like you. It can sabotage your weight loss efforts or really derail the whole fitness journey that you're on. By the way, I'm Mike. I'm a fat guy trying to not be fat anymore by making lifestyle changes. And one of those lifestyle changes is, of course, eating right. First things first, let's understand what emotional eating is. It's when we turn to food for comfort or as a way to cope with our emotions rather than eating to satisfy our physical hunger, which is really the primary purpose of food. Food is energy. Now, emotional eating can be triggered by a lot of different factors and it varies from person to person, but for me, stress is absolutely one of them. We've probably seen it before, at least you've probably experienced it. You have a bad day at work, your partner and you might be having some issues, and then, well, it's really easy to get overwhelmed, either mentally, physically, or emotionally, and turn to food. Because at least for me, when I'm overwhelmed, food is definitely something that I can control and it provides me a lot of comfort. It also provides me this false sense of relief or distraction, which is probably one of the easiest things because obviously I can enjoy the food, which will take me away from whatever issue that I need to address. But unfortunately, this is not a solution, or at least not a long-term solution. And if you're somebody who struggles with your weight like me, it makes it even harder to address this problem. And then you're stressed about the eating, which makes you even more stressed, which makes you emotionally eat even more. And it's just this terrible, terrible cycle. Another very common trigger is boredom. And this may be triggered a lot of different ways. Again, when you're just not stimulated by some other means. This usually makes people turn to snacks or treats out of just sheer monotony. There's also negative emotions like sadness, anger, or frustration, which also can make you seek comfort in food. And it's really unfortunate that emotional eating creates this cycle that keeps us trapped and struggling. But really, after a dozen donuts, a few lines of Oreos, and 3 bags of chips, all I've really discovered is that I'm worse off, especially because I'm trying to lose weight. And then what makes it even worse is this cycle repeats itself day after day, building on this unhealthy habit and this unhealthy relationship that we have with food. Because emotional eating becomes a coping mechanism that can really be hard to break. Along with all the psychological issues, emotional eating also takes its toll, of course, on our physical well-being. It can cause weight gain, poor nutrition, and the worst case scenario is all of those things and possible chronic health issues. So it's essential to understand the dangers of emotional eating so that we can take steps to prevent it. Now, the good news is there are definitely strategies and support available to help you overcome emotional eating and prioritize your well-being. Again, I make the joke of ask me how I know, but this is something that I'm working through. And because I'm working through it, I'm going to share the top 3 things that I found, again, that are helpful for me and I believe very important when it comes to breaking free from the trap of emotional eating. Number 1 is accountability and support, which is why I made this channel, why I have so many accountability systems put in place. Because remember, you're not alone on this either. Seek support from friends, family, or even professionals who can provide guidance, help hold you accountable, and they really make a world of difference when it comes to really getting that support from people. Number 2 is evaluating your current eating habits and obviously avoiding the bad ones and cultivating the good ones is very helpful. Next up, it's also very important to identify our emotional triggers. Is it stress? Is it boredom? Is it certain social situations that make you tend to reach for food as comfort? Next up, we have your environment, which does play quite a role as well. You can set yourself up for success by making it hard to do emotional eating, or really just add some obstacles, barriers between you and that emotional eating out. Like if you have easy access to tempting snacks or unhealthy foods, it becomes pretty hard to resist them, especially if your emotions are all over the place, like, something crazy is happening in your personal life. So try to keep those foods that tempt you out of reach, or at least out of immediate sight, so that way you could possibly reach for something that's not as bad for you. And with that not as bad for you, again, fill your kitchen, change your environment to be filled with nutritious options that are healthier that you enjoy. So that way, if you're having a tough day or you're craving something different, you'll be more likely to reach for the healthier choices. But on that note as well, if you do go for the unhealthier things, like I said, I talked about Oreos or chips, remember that it's not the end of the world if you do have an Oreo or a cookie or some chips. Just identify if you are replacing or trying to fix your emotional state with this food. Because it's okay to have some of this stuff in moderation, but it's not okay to, again, eat the massive size of family potato chips or 3 lines of double stuffed Oreos. And finally, we have consistency. Now, consistency is much more important than intensity, at least in my opinion, because I think it's better to take small steps forward in the right direction over a long horizon rather than sprinting for a few seconds. More likely, especially because when people start on their weight loss journey, actually it's probably better to say sprinting for a few seconds while blindfolded, which probably causes you to burn out, if not run into a tree or something. Now, there is a quick band-aid fix with emotional eating, and it's something that I'm trying to implement right now, in fact, is creating distractions. So you can distract yourself with something productive or a different hobby, something that will get the emotions a little bit more under control, but also give you, again, some sort of outlet for your time. Also, if you want to be even more distracted away from your emotional eating, right now, you could place all of your focus into that like and subscribe button, and let me know in the comments down below if you have any suggestions for somebody like me who's still going through emotional eating. Because as I'm trying to learn and adapt, I am focusing on developing healthier coping mechanisms for my emotions, which it's definitely good to break free from this whole emotional eating thing. And it does help to engage in like physical activity or just going for a walk. Things like that really have been working wonders for me. I'm also trying to practice relaxation techniques. So I've been doing, food journaling, which can be somewhat therapeutic, but really I'm just also trying to be hyper aware of what I'm doing, especially if I'm in a bad state of mind. Anything really could be a good distraction, at least maybe can turn me away from thinking about food. Because unfortunately, it's not really about hunger. It's just like wanting a bunch of ice cream or stuff that I know is not going to get me where I want to be. Because emotional eating can definitely hinder weight loss goals and, like I said, overall well-being. But the good news is we have the power to end the cycle. And I think it starts with identifying my triggers, trying to create accountability, and replacing old bad habits with good ones. And then of course, I can take that extra step. I'm trying to control my environment and remember that it's important to be consistent rather than just intense. All in all, I take it one step at a time, and I encourage you to do the same and prioritize consistency and do whatever you can to get out of the trap that is emotional eating.